Ministering to your soul requires radical self-honesty, not perfection. Being willing to sit with discomfort instead of numbing it is where true healing begins. We live in a world that trains us from a very young age to escape. We learn to turn away from pain before we ever learn how to understand it. We're taught to move quickly through discomfort, to distract ourselves, to pretend everything is fine, even when it clearly isn't. And in that rush to be okay, we miss the sacred invitation of the soul to pause, to feel, and to listen. The soul doesn't shout. It doesn't compete with the noise of our schedules or our screens. It whispers. And often what it whispers is inconvenient. It asks us to notice what we've ignored. It calls us to feel what we've buried. It invites us to tend to the parts of ourselves that we've deemed too broken, too messy, or too much. And ministering to the soul begins right there in the quiet, vulnerable decision to stop running. Radical self-honesty is not about broadcasting your flaws to the world or confessing every insecurity you carry. It's about meeting yourself in the mirror with unfiltered truth. It's about saying, here I am. This is what I feel. This is what I fear. This is what I need. And doing so without shame. Most of us have built emotional armor over time, not because we're bad or dishonest people, but because somewhere along the way we learned that vulnerability wasn't safe. Maybe we opened up once and were shut down. Maybe we shared our grief and were told to be strong. Maybe we cried in front of someone who labeled it weakness instead of courage. But the truth is, emotional honesty is one of the most sacred forms of strength we can ever practice. To sit in your own truth without judging it, without fixing it immediately, and without numbing it with work, food, busyness, or distractions, that is spiritual bravery. Ministering to the soul often looks like sitting in silence when your instinct is to run. It means asking yourself the hard questions. What am I avoiding? Where am I hurting? What part of me needs attention and care? It means noticing your patterns, not with shame, but with compassion. Maybe you withdraw when you feel afraid. Maybe you overgive to others so you can avoid confronting your own emptiness. Maybe you've been telling yourself that you're over something, when the truth is the wound still pulses beneath the surface, and the soul knows. It always knows. The soul doesn't want your perfection. It wants your presence. It wants your attention. It wants your truth. It doesn't need you to have it all figured out. It needs you to show up, to listen, and to respond with kindness. And this is where healing starts. Not in solving every issue at once, but in building a relationship with your own inner life that is based on trust and tenderness. There is so much noise in the world telling us who to be, what to achieve, how to heal, and how fast we should move on. But healing is not linear. It is not a checklist. It's more like a spiral, a deepening, a returning. You may revisit old wounds and find new insights. You may circle back to the same grief with a softer heart. You may discover that what once shattered you is now teaching you how to stand. When you minister to your soul, you begin to treat yourself with reverence. You stop looking at pain as the enemy and begin to see it as a messenger. Pain often arrives when something within us is asking to be witnessed. Maybe it's a longing you've ignored. Maybe it's an old story that needs to be rewritten. Maybe it's the younger version of you, still waiting to be seen and comforted. When we slow down enough to meet that pain, something beautiful happens. We begin to soften. We begin to open. We begin to understand that we don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love, rest, or peace. Ministering to the soul also means creating space for stillness. In a world obsessed with productivity, stillness feels counterintuitive, but healing isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes the most profound healing happens in the quiet moments, when you put your hand on your heart and say, it's okay to feel this. Or when you take a deep breath and give yourself permission to rest. Or when you say no to something that drains you, even if it disappoints others, because you're learning to honor yourself. We often think of healing as something that happens once the pain is over. But true healing happens when we decide that we are worthy of care, even in the middle of the mess. It happens when we stop asking our wounds to hurry up and heal, and instead ask ourselves what those wounds are here to teach us. And often, they teach us how to love better, starting with how we love ourselves. You can't minister to your soul if you're constantly judging it. Healing requires safety, and safety begins with compassion. When you start treating yourself like someone you're responsible for loving, not fixing, not improving, but loving, you begin to dismantle the shame that keeps you stuck. You begin to hear your own voice more clearly. You begin to trust your own wisdom. You begin to know deep in your bones that you are enough, not because you've achieved something extraordinary, but because you've chosen to be real. And being real is the most powerful choice you can make. It takes courage to feel deeply. It takes bravery to sit in uncertainty. It takes strength to choose presence over perfection. But the soul responds to truth. It doesn't need a polished version of you. It needs the honest one. The one who admits when she's tired, the one who confesses when he's afraid, the one who dares to be seen even when it's uncomfortable. There's no fast track to soul healing. It's a journey, a daily practice of returning to yourself over and over again with gentleness. Some days you'll feel strong and clear. Other days you'll feel broken and lost. Both days are sacred. Both days are part of the process. And ministering to your soul means honoring both. We live in a culture that rewards numbing. We're praised for being busy, for moving on, for bouncing back. But sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is to feel, to stay, to wait, to grieve, to rest. To say, I don't know the way forward yet, but I trust that clarity will come. That trust, that deep soul-rooted trust is the beginning of everything. There's a quiet power that rises in you when you stop pretending, when you let go of the need to appear okay and begin to tend to what's real. That's where transformation happens. That's where old wounds start to close. That's where you stop performing and start living. And it's not always comfortable, but it's always worth it. You don't need to fix yourself. You need to befriend yourself. You need to listen to the longing behind your anxiety. You need to honor the ache beneath your anger. You need to notice the sadness that shows up as silence. Every emotion you carry has a story, and every story matters. And when you create space to feel without judgment, you create space for God to move, for grace to enter, for healing to unfold in ways you couldn't have planned. You begin to realize that ministering to your soul is not a one-time act. It's a lifestyle, a sacred rhythm of showing up, telling the truth, and choosing love again and again. So today ask yourself, what is my soul asking for? What part of me needs attention? What truth am I afraid to admit? And then answer with honesty, with tenderness, with reverence. Your soul is not fragile. It's wise. It's resilient. It's capable of carrying both pain and hope. But it needs you to show up fully, authentically, bravely. Because healing doesn't happen when we deny our truth. It happens when we dare to live it. Would you like me to turn this into a downloadable PDF or provide a visual quote excerpt for sharing? The secret isn't about escaping pain, but learning how to hold it gently, letting it speak and allowing grace to meet you there. We live in a world that constantly tells us to avoid pain at all costs. Discomfort is treated like a disease. Heartbreak, disappointment, uncertainty. They're all things we're taught to run from, distract ourselves from, or numb away with anything that gives us a sense of control. We learn to perform strength instead of embodying it. We learn to suppress tears instead of letting them speak truth. And we learn to silence our inner chaos with external noise, because stillness might reveal things we're not yet ready to face. But what if healing doesn't begin with avoidance? What if it begins in the silence, in the stillness, in the very moments we've been taught to escape? Real transformation begins when we stop running from our pain and start recognizing it as a messenger. Not a monster, not a curse, but a part of us that longs to be heard, honored, and healed. And that process is not a straight line. It's a spiraling return to self. It's tender, raw, and vulnerable. It is the kind of journey that demands truth over comfort and authenticity over performance. When you stop trying to escape your pain and start holding it gently, everything changes. Your pain becomes less of an enemy and more of a doorway into deeper awareness, a doorway into compassion, not just for others, but for yourself. This is where grace lives, not in perfection, not in having it all together, but in the brave decision to show up for yourself exactly as you are, exactly where you are. Pain, when held with honesty and care, becomes sacred. It becomes a teacher. And though it might not always give you the answers you seek, it will always point you back to yourself. Not the masked, polished version of you, but the raw, whole, imperfect, deeply human you. Think about a time when life cracked you open, when things didn't go as planned, when you felt forgotten, betrayed, or exhausted beyond words. In those moments, it's easy to believe the lie that something is wrong with you, that if you had done better, been stronger, or cared less, you wouldn't be hurting. But pain is not proof of failure. It's evidence of your capacity to feel, to love, and to long for more. That is not weakness, that is humanity. The truth is, the human soul is resilient, but resilience isn't the same as resistance. We are not meant to harden ourselves against pain. We are meant to soften into it with wisdom, to trust that we can feel deeply and still stand tall, that we can acknowledge the ache and still move forward, that we can hold sorrow in one hand and gratitude in the other without betraying either. Letting pain speak means creating space for the story beneath the story. It means not brushing past your grief with toxic positivity or comparing your heartbreak to someone else's and calling it small. It means listening, really listening to what your soul is trying to say through the ache in your chest, the heaviness in your heart, or the tears that come uninvited. Sometimes pain just wants to be named. Sometimes it just wants to be acknowledged. This hurts. That alone can be revolutionary. But grace enters when you stop shaming yourself for hurting, when you stop measuring your pain or qualifying it as not bad enough. Grace enters when you allow yourself to be both strong and soft. When you let yourself cry and rest and grieve without needing to justify it. Grace enters when you realize healing isn't a performance, a return to truth. So many people walk around performing okayness. They carry the weight of their pain in silence because they're afraid of being seen as weak or too much. But what if vulnerability is not the problem? What if it's the path? What if letting someone see your pain is the first step to real connection, not the last resort of desperation? Ministering to your soul is not a one-time event. It's a daily practice. It's in the choices you make when no one is watching. It's in the way you speak to yourself when you make a mistake. It's in how you tend to your inner world when everything on the outside is chaotic. Are you listening to yourself? Are you holding space for your truth? Are you allowing the pain to speak? Or are you shaming it into silence? We've been conditioned to associate healing with quick fixes, 10 steps to happiness, 5 habits for success. But the soul doesn't respond to formulas. The soul responds to presence. It responds to honesty. It responds to love, not the kind you earn, but the kind you receive when you decide that your pain deserves compassion, not punishment. There is no trophy for outlasting your suffering. There is no reward for pretending you're okay. But there is deep abiding peace in facing yourself with honesty. There is healing in sitting with your broken pieces and saying, you are still worthy of love. This isn't about romanticizing pain. It's about dignifying the parts of your story that others might overlook. It's about understanding that healing doesn't come from denying your emotions. It comes from moving through them with tenderness. Let it hurt, let it speak, let grace meet you right where you are. There will be days when the pain feels louder than hope, when you wonder if anything will change, when the work feels too heavy and the progress too slow. That's when you must remember, healing is not linear. Growth is not a straight line. And courage is not the absence of fear, it's showing up anyway. You might not always know what healing looks like, but you will know what it feels like. It feels like finally exhaling after holding your breath for too long. It feels like telling the truth about what hurt you and realizing it no longer has power over your voice. It feels like saying, I matter, even when the world tries to convince you otherwise. It is not your job to carry everyone else's expectations on your back. It is not your calling to rescue people from their discomfort at the expense of your own. It is not your destiny to shrink so others can stay comfortable. You are not selfish for choosing boundaries. You are not broken for needing time. You are not weak for feeling deeply. Ministering to your soul is not glamorous. It's messy, it's sacred, it's human. It means tending to your pain without letting it define you. It means standing in your truth even when it shakes. It means choosing to stay when it's easier to numb, and choosing to heal when it's easier to blame. And if no one else has told you this today, your pain is valid. Your healing is worth the work. And your soul deserves your kindness more than your criticism. Be gentle with yourself. You are doing the best you can with what you know. And when you know better, you'll do better. Not because you're trying to be perfect, but because you're growing. Let the pain be your teacher, not your master. Let it shape you, not shrink you. Let it lead you to grace, not guilt. You don't have to have it all figured out to be worthy of peace. You don't have to be fixed to be whole. You don't have to hide your story to be loved. The real secret isn't about escaping pain. It's about walking through it, hand in hand with grace, and knowing that even in your lowest moments, you are not alone. Your soul is still speaking. Your light is still burning, and your healing is still unfolding. Let it hurt, let it heal, let it go, and let grace meet you there. You don't minister to your soul by striving to be whole. You do it by remembering you already are, even when brokenness clouds your view. This is not a feel-good quote or a poetic way to numb the depth of pain. This is truth. Raw and unedited. The soul doesn't require fixing. It requires remembering. And yet so many of us spend our lives on a journey chasing something we already carry within us. We've been conditioned to believe that wholeness is something earned, achieved through success, perfection, healing milestones, or other people's validation. It's as if we were told that brokenness disqualifies us from belonging, as if our wounds need to be erased before we're worthy of love. And so we chase, we perform, we prove, all in the name of becoming enough. But what if you never lost your wholeness to begin with? What if the soul is not a problem to be solved, but a truth to be reclaimed? Ministering to your soul means quieting the voices that insist you must hustle for your worth. It means interrupting the cycle of self-criticism with compassion. It means choosing to honor your pain instead of pretending it doesn't exist. The hardest work is not becoming someone new. It's remembering who you've always been. Beneath the shame, beneath the fear, beneath the layers you've worn to survive, there's a sacred strength in knowing you're already whole, even when your heart is heavy and your spirit feels tired. Because wholeness isn't the absence of broken pieces. It's the ability to hold those pieces without losing yourself in them. It's knowing that your identity isn't shattered by your suffering. The world will always tell you to hide your scars. It will applaud you for pushing through, pretending, performing, but true soul care is not a performance. It's not curated. It's not for show. It's deeply private, deeply honest, and deeply human. It's a whisper that says, you're still good, even when everything feels messy and uncertain. You don't need to prove your value by how quickly you recover or how flawless you look while doing it. You don't need to edit your grief into something more palatable. You don't need to sterilize your story to make others comfortable. You were born whole. And nothing you've walked through, not the heartbreak, not the trauma, not the silence, not the mistakes, has changed that. Pain distorts our vision. It convinces us we are too much and not enough all at once. It tricks us into thinking we have to work harder to become lovable again. But the soul does not keep score. It simply waits for us to come home to ourselves. You minister to your soul not by being better, but by being honest. Honest about where it hurts. Honest about what you need. Honest about what you've lost, what you long for, and what you've stopped believing in because it hurt too much to hope. You minister to your soul by sitting still with what is, not rushing to fix it. There's a kind of grace that meets you when you stop trying to control your healing and start trusting your humanity. When you let yourself cry without rushing to stop the tears. When you hold your fear without labeling it as weakness. When you extend kindness to the parts of yourself you've abandoned. That is where true transformation begins. Not in perfection, but in presence. Not in fixing, but in feeling. Not in striving, but in surrendering. There is something sacred in realizing that even in your most broken moment, you were never less than whole. You were never less loved, less seen, less sacred. You were never outside the circle of belonging. Your worth is not contingent upon your healing timeline. It doesn't decrease because your confidence wavers or because your heart aches more often than you'd like to admit. Sometimes ministering to your soul means giving yourself permission to not be okay, to breathe through the hard days, to let the silence speak louder than the noise. Sometimes it's letting go of the shame that keeps you quiet and choosing to let your truth be known even if your voice shakes. You don't have to be fixed to be faithful. You don't have to be confident to be courageous. You don't have to be unbroken to be beautiful. There's something holy about sitting with your broken pieces and still saying, I am worthy. There's something divine about embracing your contradictions, strength and softness, joy and grief, clarity and confusion, and letting them coexist without shame. That's where the soul breathes. The culture around us tries to monetize insecurity. It sells us the idea that wholeness is somewhere out there, just beyond reach. If you just buy this, heal that, achieve this milestone, get that relationship, then you'll feel whole. But that's not ministering to your soul. That's marketing to your wounds. Your soul doesn't need to be marketed to. It needs to be met. Met in the rawness, met in the quiet, met in the middle of the night when the tears won't stop and you wonder if anyone sees the weight you carry. And the truth is, maybe not everyone sees it, maybe they won't understand it, but that doesn't mean it isn't real. It doesn't mean it isn't worthy of compassion. You don't need to explain your pain to everyone to validate its existence. You just need to honor it, to hold it with tenderness instead of judgment, to remind yourself that feeling deeply is not a flaw. It's evidence of your humanity. The most powerful act of soul care is choosing to believe you are enough right now in this moment. Not once you've healed, not once you've achieved, not once you've cleaned up the mess. Right now, as you are. Because your worth is not up for debate. It is not dependent on anything external. It is rooted in something eternal, something unshakable. Sometimes we forget that. Sometimes the trauma is loud, the shame is persistent, the inner critic is relentless. And we forget we were created whole. We forget we are still whole. We forget that healing is not about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who we are beneath everything life layered on top of us. So when the pain comes, don't run from it. Sit with it. Let it speak. Let it tell you where it hurts, what it needs, what it fears. And then let grace in. Let grace tell you what is still true about you, even in your pain. Let grace tell you that you're not a failure just because you feel fragile. Let grace remind you that your soul doesn't need to be rescued, it needs to be remembered. You already carry what you seek, the strength, the peace, the clarity. It's not out there somewhere, it's in you. Covered maybe, buried under disappointment, heartbreak, or exhaustion, but not gone. Never gone. Your job is not to become whole. Your job is to remember that you already are. Let that truth settle in your bones. Let it silence the shame that says you're too broken to be loved. Let it still the fear that says you'll never be enough. Let it be louder than the lies that keep you striving for an impossible version of perfection. Wholeness doesn't mean you're never hurting. It means you're never alone in it. It means you don't have to hide the parts of yourself that feel too heavy or too messy. It means you're worthy of kindness in the middle of your healing, not just after it. When you stop striving and start remembering, everything changes. You begin to treat yourself with more compassion. You stop apologizing for your emotions. You create boundaries that protect your peace. You say no when it costs you your soul to say yes. You stop begging people to see your worth and start choosing environments that honor it without question. That's the work. Not becoming better, but remembering you're already enough. You were born whole. That wholeness is still there, still breathing, still burning, still waiting for you to see it again. Minister to your soul by being gentle with it. Sit with it. Speak truth to it. Listen to what it's been trying to tell you beneath the distractions. You are not here to hustle for your healing. You are here to come home to your heart. Wholeness is not earned, it's claimed. So claim it, even if you're still bleeding, even if you're still rebuilding, even if the pieces don't make sense yet. Even if today all you did was breathe and survive. That's holy too, because every step you take toward your truth, every time you choose grace over guilt, every moment you remember your worth, it ministers to your soul. And your soul has been waiting. Would you like this formatted as a speech video with timestamps and SEO content too?